The bridge of the Valiant hummed with quiet efficiency as Commander Kyle Bennett reviewed the day's patrol reports. Space near the border sectors had been calm for weeks, almost too calm. His crew worked at their stations with practiced ease, monitoring sensor feeds and communication channels that stretched across light years of empty void. Lieutenant Amy Pierce sat at the weapons console, her fingers dancing over the holographic controls as she ran another diagnostic on the ship's arsenal. Everything checked green as always. Chief Engineer Danny Wolf called up from the engine room with his daily report of perfect performance. Dr. Helen Crane was in the medical bay reviewing supplies. Pilot Officer Greg Santos lounged in his seat, occasionally tapping commands to adjust their course by fractions of a degree. It was routine, boring even, but Kyle preferred boring to the alternative. The communication panel chirped, breaking the quiet rhythm. The sound was different this time, urgent and repetitive. Amy looked up from her station, her brow furrowed. Greg sat up straighter, his casual posture disappearing in an instant. "Commander, we're receiving a distress signal," the communications officer announced, her voice tight with concern. "It's coming from a Zanari colony ship, the Peaceful Dawn. Distance approximately 40,000 kilometers. Kyle leaned forward in his command chair. The Zanari were known throughout the galaxy as peaceful traders and diplomats. They had no military to speak of, relying instead on treaties and good relations to keep them safe. Their ships were beautiful, elegant things designed for commerce and travel, not combat. "Play the message," Kyle ordered. Static filled the bridge, followed by a voice speaking in the melodic language of the Zanari. The translation software kicked in immediately, rendering the words into English. The voice was panicked, desperate. "This is Counselor Thane of the Peaceful Dawn. We are under attack by Krell raiders. They have breached our hull and are boarding our ship. We have no defenses. We have civilians, families, children. Please, anyone who can hear this, we need help. We need—" The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by harsh laughter and a different voice. This one was rougher, aggressive, speaking in the guttural tones of the Krell language. "Attention to any fools listening. This vessel now belongs to the Krell freebooters. Any attempt to interfere will result in the immediate execution of all prisoners. Stay away or they die. This is your only warning." Silence fell across the bridge. Kyle felt his jaw tighten. The Krell were pirates, raiders who preyed on weak targets and avoided anything resembling a fair fight. They were cowards with weapons, nothing more. Amy turned to look at him, her expression hard. "Commander?" Kyle studied the tactical display. The Peaceful Dawn showed on the screen, surrounded by 3 smaller Krell raiding ships. The Valiant was a single destroyer, modern and well-armed, but taking on 3 ships simultaneously was risky by conventional standards. Any other species might hesitate, might call for backup, might consider the odds too steep. But Kyle Bennett was human, and humans had a different way of calculating risk. "Set an intercept course," Kyle said calmly. "Maximum speed. Amy, start preparing weapon systems. Danny, I want every bit of power you can squeeze from those engines. Greg, plot me an approach vector that keeps us out of their optimal firing range for as long as possible." The crew moved instantly, no hesitation, no questions. They understood what was happening. They understood what being human meant in a galaxy full of prey species. "Contact the nearest Terran fleet assets," Kyle added. "Let them know what we're doing and request backup. But don't wait for a response. We move now." The Valiant's engines flared to life, pushing the ship forward with acceleration that would have crushed most alien species under the force. Humans, evolved on a high-gravity deathworld, barely noticed the pressure. Greg's fingers flew across his controls, calculating angles and trajectories with the kind of spatial awareness that came from growing up in Earth's punishing environment. As they closed the distance, Amy brought up detailed scans of the Krell ships. They were typical raider vessels, fast and lightly armored, designed for hit-and-run attacks on defenseless targets. Against a human warship, they would be outmatched in firepower and technology, but there were 3 of them, and they had hostages. Picking up communication between the Krell ships, the communications officer reported. "They've detected us. They're laughing, sir. They think we're bluffing." Kyle allowed himself a thin smile. "Good. Let them think that." The Krell had heard of humans, certainly. Everyone had by now. Earth's entry into the galactic community had been impossible to ignore. But hearing stories and facing reality were 2 very different things. "Open a channel," Kyle ordered. A moment later, the main view screen flickered to life, showing the bridge of the lead Krell ship. The commander was a hulking creature with mottled gray skin and too many teeth. He sneered at the camera, his expression dripping with contempt. "So the mighty humans send one ship?" The Krell commander growled. "You should have stayed home, little deathworlder. Turn around now or I start killing hostages. Every minute you stay, one dies. Your choice." Kyle met the alien's eyes without flinching. When he spoke, his voice was calm, almost conversational. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to release the Zanari, peacefully evacuate their ship and leave this sector. Do that and you get to live. Refuse and we'll show you exactly why Earth is classified as a death world." The Krell commander's sneer widened. "One ship against 3? You're either brave or stupid. I think stupid." He leaned closer to the camera. "I've heard the stories about humans. Tough, resilient, stubborn, but you can die just like anyone else. And you will, if you come any closer. Your choice," Kyle said simply. "You've been warned." He cut the transmission. Amy looked at him with barely contained anticipation. "Orders, sir?" Kyle studied the tactical display one more time. The peaceful dawn hung in space like a wounded animal, surrounded by circling predators. The Krell thought they were the hunters here. They thought they had control of the situation. They were about to learn a very hard lesson about the food chain. "Go dark," Kyle ordered. "Cut all running lights, switch to silent running. Route all power to stealth systems and kinetic weapons. Communications, jam their sensors. I want them blind and confused." He stood from his command chair, feeling the familiar rush of adrenaline that came before combat. Around him, his crew worked with fierce efficiency, transforming the Valiant from a visible warship into a silent ghost. "Amy," Kyle said quietly, "activate Predator Protocol." She smiled, a sharp and eager expression. "Yes, sir." The lights on the bridge dimmed to red emergency lighting. The Valiant's signature vanished from enemy sensors as stealth systems engaged. On the Krell ships, alarms would be sounding now, confusion spreading through their crews as the human vessel simply disappeared. Kyle settled back into his chair, his eyes fixed on the tactical display. The hunt was beginning, and the Krell raiders were about to discover what it meant when a deathworld species decided to go hunting. They wanted to know if the stories about humans were true. They were about to get their answer, and they weren't going to like it. The Valiant moved through space like a shadow, invisible to the Krell sensors that swept frantically across the area where it had been moments before. Inside the dimmed bridge, Kyle watched the tactical display with calm focus. The 3 Krell ships were breaking formation, spreading out to search for the human vessel that had simply vanished. Danny Wolf's voice came through the internal comm system. "All power rerouted to stealth and weapons, Commander. We're running silent and cold. They won't find us unless they physically bump into us." "Good work," Kyle replied. He glanced at Amy. "Launch the drones." Amy's fingers moved across her console with practiced precision. From the Valiant's hull, dozens of small micro-drones deployed, each no larger than a soccer ball. They scattered in different directions, each one broadcasting a false sensor signature identical to a human warship. Within seconds, the Krell sensors would be reading 15 different contacts, all appearing to be fully armed destroyers. On the main view screen, Kyle could see the Krell ships reacting to the sudden appearance of multiple targets. Their formation broke apart completely as they tried to track what they thought was an entire human fleet, materializing around them. Confusion rippled through their communications, voices shouting over each other in their harsh language. "They're panicking," the communications officer reported with satisfaction. "Multiple conflicting orders being given. Their commander is losing control of his ships." Greg Santos sat forward in his pilot seat, his eyes bright with anticipation. "Permission to launch, Commander?" Kyle nodded. "Go hunting, Greg. Make it count." The pilot grinned and was out of his seat in seconds, heading for the launch bay. Kyle pulled up the external camera feed, watching as one of the Valiant's strike craft detached from the main hull. It was a sleek, deadly machine, bristling with weapons and powered by engines that could outrun almost anything in known space. Greg's voice came through the comm. "Strike one away. Going active." The small craft's engines flared to life and it shot forward with brutal acceleration. Kyle watched the tactical display as Greg's fighter appeared on the Krell sensors like a ghost materializing from nowhere. The nearest Krell ship tried to track him, but Greg was already moving, his trajectory shifting and weaving in patterns that made conventional targeting impossible. The Krell had evolved on a low-gravity world where movement was slower, more deliberate. Greg had grown up on Earth where gravity pulled harder and faster reflexes meant survival. The difference was everything. Greg's fighter screamed past the first Krell raiding ship, releasing a spread of kinetic missiles as he passed. The projectiles slammed into the Krell vessel's engines before its crew could even react. Explosions bloomed across the raider's hull and it began to drift. Engines dead, power failing. One down, Greg reported casually, moving to target 2. The second Krell ship tried to flee, breaking away from the peaceful dawn and accelerating hard toward open space. It was a fast vessel, designed for quick escapes, but it wasn't fast enough. Greg pursued like a hawk after a rabbit, his strike craft eating up the distance with ease. The Krell ship fired wildly behind it, weapons shooting in every direction, hoping to hit something, anything. Greg rolled his craft with casual ease, avoiding the desperate fire. He came up underneath the fleeing ship and launched a single torpedo. It tracked true, slamming into the Krell vessel's underbelly. The explosion tore through the ship's reactor containment, and the entire vessel came apart in a brilliant flash of light. 2 down, Greg said. The third one just retreated to their main ship. Kyle nodded, satisfied. The remaining Krell boarding shuttle had abandoned its mission, racing back to the safety of the larger command ship, the Bloodfang. The Krell commander was no longer laughing. He was scared, and scared opponents made mistakes. "Bring your fighter back," Kyle ordered. "We're going in for the hostages." "On my way," Greg confirmed. Kyle stood and turned to his second officer. "You have the bridge. I'm leading the boarding team." He made his way to the armory, where a squad of Marines was already gearing up. They were a hard group, veterans all, their armor painted in the dark colors of Terran military special operations. Each one checked their weapons with calm efficiency, loading magazines and testing equipment. Dr. Helen Crane was there too, her medical kit strapped to her back. She looked up as Kyle entered and gave him a slight nod. "I'm coming with you. The Zanari may have wounded." Kyle didn't argue. Helen was stubborn, and more importantly, she was right. He pulled on his own armor, checked his sidearm, and grabbed a rifle from the rack. The weapon was human-made, designed for the kind of close-quarters combat they were about to face. The boarding shuttle was cramped but functional. Kyle and his team strapped in as the pilot navigated away from the Valiant toward the peaceful dawn. Through the viewport, Kyle could see the Zanari colony ship. It was beautiful even in distress, its hull decorated with flowing patterns and soft colors. Dark scorch marks from Krell weapons marred its surface. "Docking in 30 seconds, the pilot announced. Kyle checked his rifle one last time. "Remember, the Krell are expecting negotiation or a slow advance. We're not giving them either. Fast, aggressive, overwhelming. They won't know what hit them." The Marines nodded, their faces hard behind their helmet visors. These were humans, evolved from persistence hunters who had chased prey across endless savannas. Patience and endurance were in their blood, but so was the ability to sprint when the moment called for it. The shuttle docked with a metallic clang. The airlock cycled and the door hissed open. Kyle went through first, his rifle up, moving fast and low. The corridor beyond was empty, the lights flickering from damage to the ship's power systems. They moved through the peaceful dawn in silence, using hand signals to communicate. The Zanari ship was a maze of curved corridors and open spaces designed for beauty, not defense. The Marines spread out, clearing rooms with brutal efficiency. They found the first group of Krell in what looked like a cargo bay. There were 5 of them, pirates in mismatched armor arguing over which crates to steal. They turned when Kyle's team entered, reaching for their weapons, but they were far too slow. The firefight lasted 3 seconds. The Krell fell, their weapons barely clearing their holsters. One tried to surrender, raising his hand, shouting something in his language. Kyle's translator caught the words. "Wait, don't shoot, we give up." Kyle lowered his rifle slightly but didn't lower his guard. "Where are the Zanari prisoners?" The Krell pirate pointed down the corridor with a shaking hand. "Forward hold. Don't kill me, please, we didn't know you were serious. The stories, they're all true, aren't they? Humans really are." "Stay down," Kyle ordered. He gestured to 2 Marines. "Secure him." They moved forward, finding 2 more small groups of Krell. Each encounter ended the same way. The pirates were used to prey that ran or begged. They weren't prepared for prey that hunted back, that moved with coordinated precision, that showed no fear. The forward hold was a large, open space where the Zanari had been gathered. Kyle's team entered to find nearly 100 of them huddled together, their large eyes wide with fear. They were delicate beings, tall and thin, with pale skin and features that reminded Kyle of deer. Several Krell guards stood among them, weapons pointed at the prisoners. When the guards saw Kyle and his Marines, they froze. For a moment, nobody moved. Then the lead Krell made a fatal mistake. He grabbed the nearest Zenari, a young female, and pressed his weapon to her head. "Stay back," the Krell shouted. "Stay back or she dies." Kyle's response was instant. A single shot, perfectly placed, dropped the Krell before he could pull the trigger. The other guards panicked, and the firefight that followed was brief and one-sided. Within moments it was over. Helen rushed forward to check on the Zenari who had been grabbed. The young female was shaking but unharmed. Around them, the other Zenari stared at the human soldiers with expressions of awe and terror. Counselor Thane stepped forward slowly. He was an older Zenari, his skin marked with age patterns. You came one ship. We thought no one would risk it." Kyle removed his helmet. "We're human. We don't leave people to die when we can help it." "But the Krell," Thane said, his voice trembling. "They had weapons, hostages. Any reasonable species would have negotiated, called for support, waited for—" "We're not any species," Kyle said simply. "We're from Earth. And on Earth you learn that sometimes the best defense is a good offense." Outside the ship, alarms began to sound. Kyle's comm crackled to life. It was Amy, her voice urgent. "Commander, we have a problem. The Bloodfang just sent out a distress call. 3 more Krell warships are responding. They'll be here in 10 minutes. And sir, these aren't raiders. These are actual military vessels." Kyle looked at Thane, then at his Marines, then at the frightened Zenari civilians. He felt a grim smile cross his face. "Get everyone back to the shuttle," he ordered. "We're leaving." "And Amy?" "Yes, Commander?" "Tell the Krell reinforcements they're welcome to come. We called for backup too, and ours just arrived." As if on cue, new signatures appeared on the tactical display. 4 human warships dropping out of faster-than-light travel, their weapons already powering up. The hunt was about to get interesting. Kyle stood on the bridge of the Valiant, watching the tactical display as the situation evolved. The 4 new human ships had taken up positions around the peaceful dawn, forming a loose perimeter that looked casual, but was anything but. Each vessel was positioned to support the others, creating overlapping fields of fire that turned the entire area into a kill zone. The destroyer Ironclad was the largest of the reinforcements, a heavy warship bristling with weapons under the command of Captain Lisa Morgan. She had a reputation for aggressive tactics and zero tolerance for pirates. The frigate Razor, commanded by Commander Jake Palmer, was smaller but fast, designed for hit-and-run attacks. The carrier Nightfall under Captain Victor Hayes had already begun launching fighter wings that formed up in tight formations. And then there was the Phantom, a stealth corvette so advanced that it barely registered on sensors even when it wasn't trying to hide. Its commander, Zoe Kent, was a mystery to most of the fleet, but her results spoke for themselves. "The Krell reinforcements just dropped out of FTL," Amy reported. 3 heavy cruisers. They're holding position at maximum weapons range. Kyle studied the new arrivals. They were bigger than the original raiding ships, proper military vessels with serious armor and firepower. In a straight fight, they would be dangerous opponents. But whoever said anything about a straight fight, "Open a channel to all human ships," Kyle ordered. "Let's coordinate." The view screen split into multiple sections showing the faces of the other commanders. Lisa Morgan looked eager, her sharp features set in a predatory smile. Jake Palmer was calm and focused. Victor Hayes showed the controlled intensity of a chess player, seeing several moves ahead. Zoe Kent's feed was audio only, her ship still maintaining stealth protocols. "Gentlemen, lady," Kyle said, "we have 3 Krell heavy cruisers trying to decide if they want to escalate this situation. Thoughts?" "Let them come," Lisa said immediately. "My crew hasn't had a good fight in weeks." "Patience," Victor cautioned. "They're still evaluating the situation. They expected to find raiders bullying a colony ship. Instead, they find 5 human warships. They're confused." "Good." Zoe's voice came through, slightly distorted by encryption. "Confusion is weakness. I say we increase their confusion." Jake leaned forward in his feed. "The Zenari are secure?" "Transferred to the Ironclad's medical bay," Kyle confirmed. "Lisa, how are they?" "Scared but unharmed," Lisa replied. Your Dr. Crane is working with them now. They keep asking about what's going to happen next. I think they've never seen a coordinated military response before. That made sense. The Zanari were merchants and diplomats, not warriors. Their entire civilization was built on peaceful trade and mutual cooperation. Watching humans prepare for battle was probably like watching alien predators circle wounded prey. Incoming transmission from the Krell fleet, Amy announced. Kyle nodded. Put it through. A new face appeared on the view screen. This Krell was older, with scars crossing his face and military insignia marking his armor. He looked at the assembled human commanders with an expression that was hard to read. I am Fleet Commander Drac of the Krell Sovereignty, he said, his voice formal. The vessels you engaged were independent raiders not sanctioned by our government. We do not approve of their actions. Kyle raised an eyebrow. Then you won't mind if we finish what we started. Drac's expression hardened. The raiders have requested asylum. We are obligated to provide it. Leave this sector and we will deal with them according to our laws. No, Kyle said simply. The Krell commander's eyes widened slightly. You refuse? You are outnumbered. Our 3 cruisers outmass your fleet significantly. This is not a fight you can win. Lisa laughed, the sound sharp and dangerous. You think this is about mass? About tonnage? Commander Drac, you have no idea what you're dealing with. We are dealing with 5 ships against 3, Drac replied. The mathematics are simple. The mathematics, Victor said quietly, assume conventional warfare. Linear tactics. Predictable responses. Commander, humans don't do conventional. Jake spoke up, his voice calm. We're giving you one chance to reconsider. Take your ships and leave. The raiders are ours. If you interfere, we'll consider it an act of aggression. Drac's face darkened. You dare threaten us? The Krell sovereignty has been a military power for 3 centuries. We will not be intimidated by upstart deathworlders. Kyle exchanged glances with the other commanders. He saw the same understanding in their eyes. The Krell had made their choice. Now they would learn the lesson that the raiders had learned too late. Your decision, Kyle said. He cut the transmission. For a moment, silence hung over the bridge. Then Amy spoke quietly. They're powering up weapons. Moving into attack formation. All ships, Kyle broadcast. Execute Protocol Sierra. Show them what a real pack looks like. The human fleet exploded into motion. The ironclad didn't move forward to meet the enemy. Instead, it projected dozens of holographic decoys, each one a perfect copy of itself. Suddenly, the Krell sensors were reading not 1 destroyer but 20, all spreading out in different directions. The Razor lived up to its name, accelerating hard and coming at the Krell formation from an unexpected angle. Jake's ship moved with vicious speed, firing a spread of missiles and then banking away before the Krell could return fire. The missiles didn't hit, they weren't meant to. They were meant to make the Krell focus on the wrong threat. Meanwhile, the Nightfall launched its full complement of fighters. 60 small craft swarmed into space, but they didn't fly in neat formations like most species would. Instead, they moved in patterns that seemed chaotic, random. But Kyle knew better. Those patterns were based on Earth's pack hunters, on wolves and dolphins and orcas. Each fighter appeared independent, but was actually part of a greater whole, responding to the movements of the others in ways that seemed instinctive. And somewhere in the chaos, invisible to Krell sensors, the Phantom moved. Zoe's ship was hunting, silent and deadly, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. The Krell cruisers tried to respond, but they were used to fighting other prey species. They expected enemies to form defensive lines, to trade fire at range, to fight in ways that made tactical sense. The human fleet did none of those things. They were everywhere and nowhere, attacking from multiple angles, creating threats faster than the Krell could respond to them. One of the Krell cruisers locked onto what it thought was the ironclad and fired a full broadside. The target exploded in a brilliant flash, and for a moment, the Krell crew probably celebrated. Then they realized they had hit a hologram, and the real ironclad was behind them, weapons already firing. The Razor appeared alongside another Krell ship, so close that the 2 vessels were almost touching. Jake's crew unleashed a devastating point-blank salvo directly into the enemy's flank, punching through armor that was designed to resist attacks from range. Before the Krell could return fire, the Razor was gone, already accelerating away. The fighter swarm converged on the 3rd Krell cruiser like angry wasps. They didn't try to match firepower with the larger ship. Instead, they targeted sensors, communication arrays, maneuvering thrusters. Within minutes, the cruiser was blind and unable to turn effectively, drifting helplessly while trying to swat at targets too small and too fast to hit. And then the phantom struck. Kyle saw it on the tactical display, a sudden energy spike that appeared from nowhere. Zoe's ship materialized directly in front of the lead Krell cruiser and fired a spread of torpedoes at near point-blank range. The Krell vessel's shields absorbed most of the damage, but the sheer kinetic force of the impact knocked the ship backward, throwing its crew around and disrupting its systems. Before the Krell could recover, the Phantom vanished again, disappearing back into the void. "They're breaking formation," Amy reported with satisfaction. "The lead cruiser is trying to retreat." On the view screen, Kyle could see the Krell ship scattering, their tight military formation falling apart as panic set in. They were used to being the predators, the ones who inspired fear. They had never been on the receiving end of a coordinated hunt by a species that was better at it than they were. "Incoming transmission," the communications officer said. "It's Commander Drac again." Kyle gestured for it to be put through. The Krell commander's face appeared, and this time there was no arrogance in his expression. There was only fear. "Stop," Drac said, his voice strained. "Please stop this. Why should we?" Lisa's voice came through from the ironclad. "You said the mathematics were simple. Were you wrong?" "We were wrong," Drac admitted. "About everything. The stories about humans, we thought they were exaggerations. Propaganda. We didn't believe that any species could fight like this." Kyle leaned back in his chair. "Now you know better. The raiders are yours," Drac said quickly. "Take them. Punish them however you see fit. Just let us leave, please." Kyle looked at the faces of his fellow commanders. Victor nodded slightly. Jake shrugged. Lisa looked disappointed but accepting. Zoe's audio feed clicked with what might have been agreement. "Go," Kyle said. "Take your ships and leave this sector, and send a message to your government. Tell them what you saw here today. Tell them what happens when someone threatens people under human protection." Drac nodded quickly. "I will, I swear it." "But human, there is something you—" The Zalvan dreadnought hung in space like a floating fortress, its massive hull dwarfing every other ship in the area. Kyle had read about the Zalvan Empire in the briefings that all human commanders received. They were one of the oldest spacefaring civilizations in the galaxy, a warrior culture that had built their empire through conquest and strength. They were larger than humans, stronger, and they had technology that was centuries ahead in some areas. They were also the only species that had ever fought humanity to a draw in the few border skirmishes that had occurred since first contact. "Should we go to battle stations?" Amy asked quietly, her hand hovering over the weapons console. Kyle shook his head slowly. "Wait, they hailed us. That means they want to talk, not fight. For now." "Incoming transmission," the communications officer announced. "Put it through. All ships." The view screen flickered and a face appeared that made several crew members gasp. The Zalvan was massive, easily twice the size of a human, with dark blue skin and 4 arms. His face was angular and sharp, with eyes that burned with intelligence. He wore armor that looked like it could stop a tank shell, and weapons were visible on his belt. But what struck Kyle most was the expression. It wasn't hostile. It was curious, almost amused. "I am war leader Krax of the Zalvan Imperial Fleet," the alien said in perfect English. His voice was deep, resonant. "I have been observing your battle with the Krell forces. Most impressive." Kyle kept his expression neutral. "War leader? This is human territory. The Zalvan Empire has no jurisdiction here." Krax laughed, a booming sound that filled the bridge. "Jurisdiction? I care nothing for jurisdiction, human. I care about what I just witnessed. The Krell sovereignty sent 3 military cruisers to this sector. Good ships, experienced crews. You scattered them like frightened children with only 5 vessels. They made the mistake of threatening civilians under our protection." Lisa's voice came through from the ironclad. "We don't take that lightly." "No, you do not," Krax agreed. He leaned forward, his eyes studying each of the human commanders. "The galaxy is full of stories about your species. Earth, they say, is a death world, a planet so harsh that any creature evolving there becomes inherently dangerous. We thought these were exaggerations, smaller species trying to make themselves sound threatening. And now?" Jake asked from the Razor. "Now I see the truth," Krax said. "You fight like Zalvan. No, you fight better than Zalvan in some ways. Your tactics are unpredictable, creative. You take risks that no sane species would attempt, and somehow they work. It is fascinating. Victor spoke from the nightfall, his voice cautious. Fascinating enough to bring a dreadnought? That's a lot of firepower for simple observation. Indeed, Krax agreed. I came because I have a proposal. A test, if you will. The Zalvan Empire respects strength above all else. We want to see if the stories about humanity are truly accurate. So I propose single combat. Kyle felt his stomach tighten. Single combat? Not to the death, Krax clarified. A test of skill and strategy. Champion against champion. Your best fighter against mine. If you win, I take my ship and leave peacefully. If I win, you surrender your vessels to me as prizes of war. That's insane, Amy muttered. But Kyle was thinking. A dreadnought carried thousands of weapons, enough firepower to destroy the entire human fleet in minutes. Even with their superior tactics, the humans couldn't win against that much mass and firepower. Krax knew it. This was a test, but it was also a trap. I counter-propose, Kyle said suddenly. Not single combat between champions. A strategic test instead. Your crew against mine in a tactical simulation. No physical fighting. A test of command, strategy, and creativity. Krax's eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled, showing teeth that would make a shark jealous. Interesting. You're clever, human. You know your species is smaller, weaker physically, so you shift the battlefield to one where your strengths matter more. Very well, I accept. But I choose the scenario. Agreed, Kyle said, hoping he wasn't making a terrible mistake. Excellent. Prepare your crew. We begin in 1 hour. And human? Make this entertaining. The Zalvan do not like to be bored. The transmission cut out. Kyle immediately opened a channel to all the human ships. All commanders conference now. Minutes later, the view screen showed all 5 human commanders in split screen. Lisa spoke first. Are you sure about this, Kyle? The Zalvan are master tacticians. They've been waging war since before humans left Earth. Which is exactly why we need to do this differently, Kyle replied. They expect conventional tactics, military doctrine, textbook responses. We give them Earth chaos instead. Explain, Victor said. Kyle stood and began pacing. Every species in the galaxy evolved somewhere specific. The Zalvan come from a high-gravity world like us, but theirs is stable, predictable. Their tactics reflect that. Steady, powerful, overwhelming force. The Krell are opportunists evolved from scavengers. They pick easy targets and flee from hard ones. And humans? Zoe's voice asked. We're from a death world, Kyle said. Earth is chaos. Earthquakes, hurricanes, ice ages, predators everywhere. We evolved to adapt, to survive when the rules change without warning. That's our advantage, Jake nodded slowly. So we make the simulation unpredictable. Change the variables constantly. Exactly, Kyle said. Amy, Danny, Greg, Helen, I need you all in the simulation. Each of you brings something different. Amy's aggression, Danny's technical creativity, Greg's spatial awareness, Helen's strategic thinking. We combine all of that, and we give the Zalvan something they've never seen before. What about the rest of us? Lisa asked. Observe and advise, Kyle said. If you see an opportunity, call it out. This isn't about individual glory. It's about showing them what humans do best. We work together, adapt together, win together. The hour passed quickly. Kyle and his core team entered the neural simulation pods, lying back as the systems connected to their minds. The sensation was disorienting at first, then reality shifted, and suddenly Kyle was standing on the bridge of a simulated warship. Across from him, in a separate simulated vessel, war leader Krax materialized with his command crew. The Zalvan were impressive even in simulation, their massive forms moving with practiced ease. The scenario is simple, Krax announced, his voice echoing in the simulation space. You command a small fleet defending a civilian station. I command an invasion force with superior numbers and firepower. Your objective is to hold out for 30 minutes. My objective is to destroy your forces and capture the station. If you survive, you win. If I succeed, I win. Kyle looked at his team. Amy was already studying the tactical display. Danny was examining the ship's systems. Greg was plotting courses. Helen was analyzing the enemy formation. They were ready. Begin, Krax said. The simulation activated. Immediately, Kyle saw the problem. The Zalvan fleet was massive, dozens of ships in a perfect formation moving toward the station. His own force was tiny in comparison, 5 ships against 30. In a straight fight, they would last maybe 5 minutes, so they didn't fight straight. Danny, can you hack the station's defense grid? Kyle asked. In a simulation? Give me 30 seconds. Greg, plot a retreat vector that takes us through the asteroid field near the station. That's suicidal, the field is too dense. Exactly. They won't expect it, Amy grinned. I see where you're going. Helen, can you predict their formation changes? Working on it. They're following classical Zalvan doctrine. Pattern Croth 7, I think. That means their command ship will stay at the center, protected. Then that's our target, Kyle said. The Zalvan fleet advanced steadily, their formation perfect, their movements coordinated. Krax was using overwhelming force exactly as expected, but then Kyle's ship scattered, breaking in different directions instead of forming a defensive line. The Zalvan forces split to pursue, and that's when Danny activated his hack. The station's defense turrets, which should have been neutral, suddenly came online and started firing at the Zalvan ships. It wasn't enough to destroy them, but it forced them to divert shields and attention. Greg led 2 of Kyle's ships into the asteroid field, flying with reckless precision through gaps that seemed impossible. The pursuing Zalvan ships tried to follow and immediately collided with asteroids, their larger size and more cautious piloting working against them. Meanwhile, Amy took the remaining ships and attacked from an unexpected angle, targeting not the Zalvan combat ships, but their supply vessels in the rear. The Zalvan formation had to adjust, pulling ships back to defend, creating gaps in their perfect formation. Helen called out predictions, and Kyle exploited every one. When the Zalvan moved left, Kyle went right. When they concentrated fire, he dispersed. When they spread out to cover more area, he struck at their weakest point. 15 minutes into the simulation, the Zalvan had lost 8 ships and hadn't managed to land a single serious hit on Kyle's force. Krax's simulated face showed surprise, then frustration, then something else. Respect. The war leader changed tactics, abandoning classical doctrine and trying to match Kyle's chaos. But the Zalvan crew wasn't trained for it. They were warriors, yes, but they were warriors who followed orders and formations. When they tried to improvise, they made mistakes. Kyle's team capitalized on every mistake. Danny found a weakness in the Zalvan shield harmonics and exploited it. Greg pulled a maneuver that... Kyle ran toward the medical bay, his heart pounding. Behind him, Amy and Greg followed, weapons drawn. The corridors of the ironclad seemed longer than usual, each step taking forever. Through the comm system, he could hear chaos, screaming, and that terrible cold voice that was using Helen's mouth to speak. They burst into the medical bay to find a scene from a nightmare. The Zenari who had been lying on the medical bed was standing now, but his movements were all wrong. His limbs bent at angles that shouldn't be possible, and his eyes glowed with a sickly green light. Helen stood next to him, her body rigid, her eyes showing the same unnatural glow. "Stop," Kyle ordered, raising his weapon. Helen's head turned toward him with mechanical precision. When she spoke, it was still that cold, emotionless voice. "We are the Shade. We do not stop. We consume, we adapt, we spread." "Helen, if you're in there, fight it," Amy said, her voice shaking. "She cannot hear you," the Shade said through Helen's mouth. "She is ours now, as this Zenari is ours, as many others scattered throughout the galaxy are ours. We have been watching humanity for some time. Your kind is interesting, unpredictable, dangerous. We wish to understand you better." The possessed Zenari moved suddenly, faster than should be possible for that species. It lunged at Greg, who barely managed to dodge. Kyle fired, but the Shade-controlled body twisted impossibly, avoiding the shot. "Non-lethal weapons only," Kyle shouted. "Helen's still in there somewhere." That made the fight harder. They couldn't just shoot to kill. They had to disable, contain, somehow stop the Shade without killing their friend and the innocent Zenari. The possessed beings moved with inhuman coordination, working together like parts of a single organism. Greg managed to tackle the Zenari, pinning it to the ground. But Helen moved to help it, and Kyle had to intercept her. He grabbed her wrists, feeling her supernatural strength as she tried to break free. This wasn't Helen's normal human strength. This was something else, something using her body like a puppet. "Sedate her," Kyle yelled. Amy grabbed a medical injector and plunged it into Helen's neck. The doctor's body went limp, but the green glow in her eyes remained for a moment longer. The Shade's voice spoke one last time through her unconscious mouth. "You cannot stop us. We have already spread, already infected, already won." Then the glow faded and Helen was just Helen again, unconscious but hopefully still herself somewhere inside. Kyle's comm crackled. It was Lisa Morgan's voice, and she sounded terrified. Kyle, we have multiple shade manifestations across the fleet. 3 crew members on my ship, 2 on the Razor, 1 on the Nightfall. They're coordinating, sharing information, and they just sent out a signal. A strong one. What kind of signal? Kyle demanded. A beacon. Calling something. And whatever it is, it's big. Multiple FTL signatures incoming. Dozens of them. Kyle ran back to the bridge, leaving Amy and Greg to secure the medical bay. When he arrived, the main view screen showed a sight that made his blood freeze. Ships were dropping out of FTL all around them. Dozens of vessels from different species, different designs, different origins. But they all had one thing in common. They all showed that same sickly green glow from their windows and engines. The Shade Fleet. Kyle whispered. War Leader Krax's dreadnought was still in the area, and his face appeared on the comm screen. For the first time, Kyle saw genuine fear in the Zalvan's expression. This is why I warned you, human. The Shade are the nightmare of the galaxy. They don't conquer. They infect. They turn entire civilizations into extensions of their hive mind. And once they mark a target, they never stop. Kyle looked at the tactical display. The human fleet was strong, but they were looking at 40 infected ships, all controlled by a single intelligence, all working in perfect coordination. It was the ultimate pack hunter, and it had turned its attention toward humanity. All ships, Kyle broadcast. We need backup. Maximum priority distress call. And someone get me every piece of information we have on the Shade. Minutes later, Lisa Morgan appeared on screen. I've been researching. The Shade are parasitic, but they need a living host. They can't survive in dead bodies. The infected can be saved if we can somehow break the connection to the hive mind. How? Kyle asked, unknown. Every species that's tried to fight them has either been consumed or has fled. There's no recorded instance of anyone defeating a Shade fleet. Then we'll be the first, Kyle said grimly. The Shade fleet began to advance, their movements perfectly synchronized. Traditional tactics wouldn't work against an enemy that shared a single mind. They would predict every conventional strategy, counter every standard maneuver. The humans needed something new, something the Shade had never encountered before. Kyle thought back to the simulation with Krax. The Zalvan had been a formidable opponent because of their coordination and discipline. But humans had won because they were unpredictable, chaotic, creative. The Shade were even more coordinated than the Zalvan, which meant the humans needed to be even more chaotic. New strategy. Kyle announced to all ships. We're going completely independent. No coordination, no formation, no predictable patterns. Each ship does whatever it thinks will work. The Shade can predict teamwork, but they can't predict pure chaos. That's insane, Jake Palmer protested from the Razor. We'll be completely uncoordinated. Exactly, Kyle said. Trust each other to do something unexpected, then adapt to whatever that is. Make it impossible for the hive mind to predict what we'll do next. Lisa Morgan laughed suddenly. That's the most human thing I've ever heard. I'm in. One by one, the other commanders agreed. Even Krax, watching from his dreadnought, looked intrigued. If you're going to try this madness, the war leader said, the Zalvan will help. We owe you that much. And besides, the Shade are enemies to all free species. The battle began. The Shade fleet advanced in perfect formation, their movements calculated and precise. They expected the humans to form a defensive line, to fight as a coordinated unit. Instead, each human ship went in a completely different direction, doing completely different things. The Ironclad charged straight at the enemy fleet, weapons blazing, looking like it was attempting a suicide run. But at the last second, Lisa pulled her ship into a hard turn, using the Shade's own vessels as cover against their allies' fire. The Razor didn't engage at all. Instead, Jake Palmer headed straight for the largest Shade vessel, broadcasting a signal that mimicked a Shade infection signature. The enemy ships, confused by the false signal, hesitated for a crucial second. The Nightfall's fighters launched, but instead of attacking, they scattered in every direction, making it impossible for the Shade to track all of them at once. Some fired at engines, some at sensors, some just flew wildly to create confusion. Zoe's Phantom did what it did best. It vanished, then reappeared inside the Shade formation, fired a spread of torpedoes, and vanished again before the enemy could react. And Kyle, aboard the Valiant, made a desperate gamble. He headed straight for the Peaceful Dawn, the Zanari colony ship that had started this entire crisis. Danny Wolf worked frantically in engineering, routing power to every system at once in ways that should have overloaded the reactor. "Danny, I need everything we've got," Kyle said. "If I push it any harder, we'll explode," Danny warned. "Then push it until we're about to explode, and stop 1 second before that. That's insane." "I know. Do it anyway." The Valiant's reactor redlined, power flooding through systems faster than they were designed to handle. The ship accelerated beyond safe limits, pushing toward the peaceful dawn with suicidal speed. Kyle grabbed the Zanari ship with tractor beams and used it as a massive shield, hiding behind its bulk while firing around it at shade vessels. It was chaos. Pure, beautiful, unpredictable chaos. And the Shade, for all their coordination and shared intelligence, couldn't adapt fast enough. They were used to fighting species that had patterns, doctrines, sensible tactics. The humans had none of that, but they were still losing. The Shade had too many ships, and even chaos couldn't overcome those numbers indefinitely. Kyle watched as the Razor took a hit, shields failing. The Ironclad's armor was being worn down by constant fire. They needed a way to win, not just to survive. "There has to be a central node," Helen's voice suddenly came through the comm. She was awake again, her voice weak but clear. "The Shade hive mind needs a central intelligence to coordinate all the infected. Find it, and you can shut down the entire fleet." "Where?" Kyle demanded. "I don't know. But when they infected me, I could feel it. A presence watching through my eyes. It was strong, close, probably on one of the larger ships." Kyle studied the tactical display. There in the center of the Shade fleet was a massive carrier that hadn't moved since the battle started. It wasn't fighting. It was just watching, coordinating. "That's it," Kyle said. "That's the command ship. All vessels, I need a path to that carrier." "On it," Lisa Morgan replied immediately. What happened next would be remembered in military academies for generations. The human fleet, battered and desperate, formed up for one last push. But they didn't just attack. They created a corridor of chaos, each ship sacrificing shields and armor to clear a path. The Ironclad and Razor flew side by side, their combined firepower punching through the Shade lines. The Nightfall's fighters swarmed the enemy, creating a wall of explosions and confusion.